welcome to Labor Lens. I am Sharon Ijason. On this week's episode of the program, we have interesting news stories for you. We will also be discussing about the struggle towards achieving a new national minimum wage as the Senate has approved the 30,000 naira which was proposed by the Tripartite Committee. After several hours of deliberations bordering on the oil and gas sector in Nigeria, workers' welfare and state of the nation, President of the Petroleum and Natural Gas Senior Staff Association of Nigeria, Pengasan, urged the federal government to appoint a substantive minister for petroleum to strengthen the industry.
The office of presidency is too cumbersome. And so, for you to also have a minister of petroleum resources residing in that office, I think, having tried it for the past 4 years and looking at the hiccups and everything we do there, the government should also make sure that we separate that and have a substantive minister that also has some commercial level of approval. But also know that everything that got to do there will also go to the Federal Executive Council. And the president, as commander-in-chief, has to be facility and making sure that all agencies, ministers are being coordinated through his office. So there is no way things can also not be done. But for that, we also have to join Nigerians and appeal that office should be separated, looking at where we are coming from and where we intend to go.
The union also frowned at some indigenous oil companies who disengaged more than 300 workers without paying them off properly, despite owing them salary arrears. The National Executive Council of the association expects that issues surrounding optimal performance of the country's refineries should be addressed to enhance local refining of petroleum.
Tuesday's passage of the new minimum wage bill by the Nigerian Senate is good news to a cross-section of workers in the nation's capital. The House of Representatives had earlier passed the bill in January. Charity Samuel is an office assistant in a private facility. She's excited at the news of more cash to her purse at the end of every month.
We look at our transportation before. They pay us 40,000. We spend our transport every day, going and coming. It's 400. We feed. So all this one now, I will cooperate of it. If they can add our salary for us, and we thank God because they approve it.
Like Charity, others like Chioma Chukwujeku, Sonia Pokwola, and Ngozi Joseph are elated and want implementation to commence immediately.
Passing the bill is a good development because naturally if you get to the market, the prices of goods and services are very high.
I'm happy that they are increasing the salary. At least I will make my market will move.
We need to manage our resources in Nigeria now so the minimum will not be hard to government, federal government to be implement this thing.
But for Adeyemo Amos, the joy brought about by the prospects of a new wage may be short-lived, considering the likely rise in inflation as soon as workers begin to earn a new pay package.
Inflation in the country has eroded the value of naira. So the minimum wage of this 30,000 naira we have a little impact on the life of not only me but all the entire Nigerians.
The Nigeria Labour Congress is full of thanks to both chambers of the National Assembly for their efforts in improving the quality of life of the Nigerian workers. Its acting president, Najim Yassin, wants the Buhari administration to sign the bill before 1st of May.
Nigerian workers will be very happy to see that the minimum wage is passed into law before even our May Day, where all workers will be celebrating May Days and they will be celebrating that the 30,000 minimum wage is being put in place.
NLC believes the struggle for a new wage is not over until its members begin to earn the approved wage.
In November 2017, Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari set up a tripartite committee to come up with a new national minimum wage. After several deliberations, organized labor, government, and the Nigeria Employers Consultative Association agreed on 30,000 naira. With this development, I went in search of a worker who earns between 22,500 and 35,000 naira to see what the lifestyle of such worker is. Favour Anyanwu is a casual worker at a construction company situated in Lagos suburb. She tells me she earns 35,000 naira monthly, but it's not sufficient for her. Just before the interview, Favour Anyanwu pleaded that we keep her face out of the picture as much as possible.
My daily transport is 400 naira times 30 days, that is 12,000 naira. And I'm feeding myself 300 naira, that is 700 naira. Out of this,
a mother of 3, who is also the breadwinner of the family, tells me her job entails lots of risk and is not qualified to access healthcare and more.
How safe has it been for you so far?
there's no safety there. Accident happen, machine used to cut. People don't, for some department there that guests used to collapse because of the fire. And at the end of the day, they can use their salary to pay the hospital bill.
Favour Anyanwu tells me how much she would like to earn, as she can't afford an accommodation, but currently is cutting with a family member.
What I need from Nigeria, from our government, it should help us. At least 70-75 is not too much. After taking away transport and taking away your feeding, you can see have as much to assist yourself.
The Minimum Wage Act prescribed a 5-year cycle of review. Between 2016 and 2018, pump price of petroleum products increased by 85% and the devaluation of the naira by 100%. Thus, the cost of living and inflation increased. According to a data released by the Nigerian Labour Congress, here is a graphics of the figure 21 states presented during negotiation. The first National Minimum Wage Act of 1981 prescribes a minimum wage of 125 naira per month by President Shehu Shagari and Hassan Sumonu-led Labour Executive. This was revised in 1991 to 250 naira per month, negotiated by late Pascal Bafayu-led NLC with Adams Oshiomhole as deputy. Another round of negotiation opened in 1990. During the administration of General Abdulsalam Abubakar, the minimum wage was moved to 3,000 naira. The national minimum wage was revised again in 2001 to 5,500 per month for state workers and 7,500 for federal workers and oil-producing states. There were unique features to this deal. Provisions were made that the following year in 2002, there would be a 15% increase across board and a 25% increase in 2003. These, however, were not fulfilled. The current 18,000 naira minimum wage due for a review since 2015 was negotiated under NLC President Abdul Wahid Umar. From my findings, after interacting with Favour Anyanwu, she spent 50,000 naira on the average monthly, but earns 35,000 naira. She is hopeful that the president will assent to a living wage for workers.
I think the minimum wage issue is long overdue, and it is to the best interest of the 8th Assembly to have approved it, because it's been a long waiting issue in the Nigerian political space. And for me, that is the best thing. Though it's less than $100, that is the best thing this government can do to the Nigerian populace.
The most important thing is we just have to commend the President and the Senate for having approved the new minimum wage, because it's long awaiting. We can imagine the level of anxiety that hinged around it and what the expectation was. As at today, the tension has really calmed down, and that is a credit to the organized labor. And we believe that it's going to...
We appeal to the President to assent to it. And the Senate appeal to the governors that they should do the needful. The money has to start immediately. We are really suffering. The economy is not good. All of us contributed to it. So we all will join hands to come out of it. But let it be assented so that the implementation will start immediately. One thing is to assent to it. Second thing is to be implemented immediately. Any state that refuses to implement, there should be a sanction. They have enough. They can cut off their security votes just to do that. The workers are suffering.
Well, it's a welcome development because the workers, they have actually strived for this for a very long time. But I think this is long overdue, and I hope that the President is going to approve it.
As a labor union, we're very happy. The speed in which the politicians are attacked, despite their tight schedule of campaigning and all. And then it was a matter that we really fought for. And we're happy that the Senate has finally passed. Yeah, it has to be sent to the presidency for assent. But if you remember, the presidency was ready to pay that 30,000. So we don't see any challenge there once it comes back to the presidency. But we want it to be done immediately before the 8th Assembly goes, so that they won't start it all over again or create unnecessary crisis.
On the Profile interview segment this week, I will be speaking with the President of Trade Union Congress, who also doubles up as the President of the Association of Senior Civil Servants of Nigeria. Boboy Kagaima during this interview explained why it's of utmost importance for the federal government and the state government to expedite payment of the new national minimum wage. Take a listen. It's good to have you on the program.
My pleasure, Sharon.
It's been a while after our last discussion, and I remember that we discussed labor and politics. We will still go back there, but my focus for this episode is the new national minimum wage. We are very much aware that the Senate actually has approved 30,000 naira as a new national minimum wage. And I'm also aware that the National Assembly and the Senate actually has to reconcile the figures and look at their recommendation to be in harmony, to be presented to the President. Then the President has to actually sign before Nigerian workers start to enjoy this 30,000 naira as a new minimum. Can you tell me, what do you want the government to do, or the National Assembly to do, to ensure that this process is expedited?
Well, thank you, Sharon. And I want to seize this opportunity to appreciate the Senate on behalf of the working class. And the national minimum wage is not just about the figure. We have the other leg that pertains to the threshold and the frequency of review. We haven't had details of what the Senate has done. Not until we get those details, we will make our comments. And we do know that the two chambers have to harmonize their own position. And I'm pretty sure that will be done very soon. And if that is done, we also expect Mr. President to give his assent so that Nigerian workers can enjoy a new national minimum wage, even though it's still far from what we wanted. You know, we expected over 56,000 naira, but here we are agreeing on 30. So what I just want to say is that our committee recommended a threshold, in fact removing the barrier, except where we have certain exemptions that must have gone through the Ministry of Labour and processed and consensusly agreed upon by the critical stakeholders, that is the tripartite committee of the tripod. Then we had also agreed at our own committee level that the frequency of review of the national minimum wage should be 4 years. So we don't know what the Senate has done. We need to get into those details before we say whether they've done an excellent job or not. So for now, we give them a pat on the back and we hope that they will harmonize their positions with the House of Representatives that had taken its own decision long before now, so that the President will be given the opportunity to assent to the bill.
So are you telling me that Labour is still having this fear of discrepancy in terms of the figure? Because we know that there was a recommendation by different groups saying that state workers should earn probably 22,500, while the federal workers should earn 30,000 naira as the minimum. Are you telling me that there is still that fear on ground in terms of how much should the Nigerian worker earn?
No, there's no fear. We've gone past that now because the Senate and the House of Representatives have just come out with just one single figure of 30,000 naira, different from what the federal government recommended of 27,000 for state workers and 30,000 for federal workers. Now we have a one-figure national minimum wage, which has been our position, that we are not having different markets. We are not going to, our kids are not going to different schools, and we are not going to different hospitals. We go to same. So there's no reason why a national minimum wage, the barest minimum pay a worker should end, shouldn't be across board. So now that we have that, we commend the National Assembly for standing by Nigerian workers, and we hope that Mr. President will do the needful.
With your experience as a Labour leader, which tends up to more than a decade, how would you rate the process which brought about this 30,000 naira minimum wage, owing to the fact that it took several years for Labour to achieve this?
Well, we have this saying that it's better late than none. It was a very, very difficult process with threats of embarking on industrial action by the working class. Twice, there had to be interventions, but here we are. Anything that ends well is commendable. So we won't say our labors are gone in vain, but what we will say is that the federal, states, and the organized private sector, as soon as Mr. President assents to this, should immediately, without the unnecessary process of discussing the consequential increases, go ahead and implement the national minimum wage.
We are still having issues of some states not being able to pay workers' salaries as at when due. Looking at the fact that there will be an increase any moment from now, how do you think the states will actually meet up with the expectations? What is your word of advice or recommendation to such states?
Well, we have said it over and over again, and we are happy that Mr. President also said it at the eve of the gubernatorial elections, he called on Nigerians to take a very definitive position to the effect that any governor that doesn't promise to pay workers' salary should be voted out, or not, if he is a candidate that is not in power, should not be voted in. And that has been our position in the movement.
So the workers should be responsible for their leaders? Are you telling me that for governors that are not paying workers' salaries?
They don't have any reason. There's no reason why, because they have the funds. We keep saying that governors that feel they cannot pay are lazy governors, and they are not prepared for the act of governance. So they should give ways to people who are prepared to render service to the citizens of their respective states. So to us, you have enough from the federation account, and you have enough you can develop internally in terms of bringing up, increasing your internal generated revenue, because that is an area where they don't pay any attention. So any right-thinking governor will strive to enhance their internal generated revenue such that they can perform or even pay salaries with their internal generated revenue, so that anything that comes from the federation account can be used for other developmental projects.
You're the president of the Trade Union Congress and also the president of the Association of Senior Civil Servants. How would you rate the government relationship with its workers?
Well, it's of twofold. The federal government is doing very well. I wouldn't say very well, it's doing well in terms of workers' salary payments. The only area that they are lacking is the area of pensions. We do know that pensions have been paid up to, well, I don't know, maybe November last year, as at now. So those who have retired between November to today are still not enjoying their pensions. So that is the area where the federal government is found wanting. But for the states, most of the states have this problem. And it's not unconnected to the fact that they are not concerned about good governance, they are not concerned about fighting corruption, they are not concerned about raising their internal generated revenue, and above all, they feel strongly that the money they even generate internally is pocket money for the boys.
So moving forward, still talking about the national minimum wage, there's a news going around about the federal government wanting to make 50% increase on VAT. And the Minister for Budget is saying that this is to fund the new national minimum wage. Is this acceptable?
Well, to us it's not acceptable. What we want them to do is to expand their tax net, particularly for the bourgeois class, for the rich. Ensure that you bring them into the tax net and ensure that they pay appropriate tax. That is the beginning point. Then, thereafter, you can look at the possibility of the value-added tax where it doesn't affect the common man. Because if you say you are going to enforce or increase the value-added tax now, to us, is only transfer of what we call transfer of aggression. You rob Peter to pay Paul, or you give a worker with one hand and collect it with another hand.
And so, is that acceptable?
To us, it's not acceptable. Where you have the opportunity of really taxing the rich. The people paying taxes now are the working class and the middle class in this country. The rich don't pay appropriate taxes. They get waivers, they avoid payment of taxes. So what we want FIRs to do is to ensure that they bring these people into the tax net and ensure that they pay not only the tax but the appropriate tax. That way, governments at all levels will have enough money to pay salaries, enough money to execute other developmental projects that will benefit Nigerians generally.
It was an interesting conversation I had with you.
My pleasure, Sharon. Thank you.
And that's all we can take on today's edition of the program. Join us next week for a fresh edition of the show. I am Sharon Ijason. Thanks for watching, and remember, labor creates wealth.